This was even better than the first book. So this is The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman. It is book 2 of his Dark Materials. And it was published in 1997 when Philip Pullman was just 51. Just 51. Younger than me. This whole book was a pleasure to read, and I'm going to go over some of the positives and some slight negatives. It starts with a totally new character called Will. He's a 12-year-old boy, and he lives in our world, our universe, as opposed to the other universe that Lyra lives in. And Will has a paranoid schizophrenic mum. And immediately, just like I said for the first book, you can really see Pullman's skill as a writer. He does a wonderful job of stirring up your empathy for Will as he tries to deal with his mother, looking out for her and loving her in her terrible state. I won't go into any more of the plot because I like to keep these things spoiler-free, and the small details I do talk about are pretty much on the back of the book. So this book takes place in 3 universes. There's the universe that Lyra is in the first book. There's our universe that Will is in, and then there's a third kind of in-between universe. So I guess you could kind of call it a portal fantasy, and if you've ever read The Magician's Nephew, you do kind of see some parallels between this book and that. And one really cool thing about my copy of the book is that there are these nice markers which show you which universe the narrative is currently in. There are some very exciting action sequences in this book, and even when it's not all-out action, the writing is very engaging. It's very readable. Also, without getting into spoilers, Pullman has done something with his ideas in this book that makes it very enthralling, and that is to take a mystery from our world. So it is a mystery to people in our world as of now, and then come up with a plausible explanation for it. And the explanation is good enough to almost make you go, wow, imagine if that was actually true, which can potentially be problematic, especially when there are kids reading these books and they may actually think that that is true when really it's pretty much nonsense. So I do have a few negatives, but these are really slight. One thing is the alethiometer, the golden compass from the first book, is just a bit too powerful. At certain times I was like, just ask the alethiometer, it's going to give you the answer to this problem. And funnily enough, at one point Lyra promises not to use it, which kind of felt a bit too convenient. Another thing, the second last chapter was kind of odd. To be so close to the end of the book, it focused on 2 characters that I really was not emotionally invested in at all. The chapter was fine, it just would have been nice to be focused on the main characters. In fact, I feel like other parts of the last section of the book kind of lost their way a bit as well. I felt unclear on where people were going and how they knew where to go. But the last chapter had a heap going on and it was all jam-packed into 20 pages. And the last negative touches on something I talked about at the end of the first book. At the end of the last book, it just feels a little bit preachy. And one aspect of that was kind of showing how bad adults can be, whereas this one kind of shows how bad kids can be, so that kind of balances out a bit. But without going into spoilers, there's a definite perspective that the characters have in the book, or rather that you feel that the author is trying to push. It's a certain perspective on who the good and the bad guys are in the universe. Ultimately though, although I talked about those negatives, I really did enjoy this book. In many ways, it felt quite different to the first book. Trilogies often suffer from what's called middle book syndrome, and I feel that this one really avoided that. And I think it did that by just introducing a whole bunch of cool new stuff, especially the subtle knife of the title. So yeah, I give this one 4.5 out of 5. And if you've read this, let me know in the comments whether you think it's better than the first one or you preferred the first book to this one. So that's my review of The Subtle Knife. Be sure to subscribe if you want to find out what I think of the third book. Thanks for watching. See ya.